you had a lovely holiday. Well, Easter holidays. Right, we've got a new story today. It's called Flat Stanley. Let's have a read. So, the title of this story is Flat Stanley. The author is a man called Jeff Brown, and it's illustrated by Rob Biddulph. Now, Rob does some drawing on YouTube that you can have a look at and have a go at as well. So, let's have a read. Flat Stanley. Hey! Arthur Lambchop called from the bedroom he shared with his brother Stanley. Oh, look, he's pointing in there. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop, cared greatly for politeness and correct speech. Hay is for horses, not people, said Mrs. Lambchop. But look, said Arthur, pointing. Across Stanley's bed lay his enormous pinboard, which had fallen on top of him. Look, there it was on the wall. It's fallen off. Oh, there's Stanley. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop hurried to lift it off, but Stanley wasn't hurt. What's going on here? He said cheerfully. Oh, gosh, said Arthur. Stanley's flat. Look, flat like a piece of paper. As a pancake, said Mr. Lambchop. Let's all have breakfast, said Mrs. Lambchop. Then we can take Stanley to see Dr. Dan. You can take him to the doctor because he's too flat. There's the doctor. Look, can you see how flat he is? Dr. Dan examined Stanley. How do you feel? He asked. I felt sort of tickly after I got up, Stanley said, but I feel fine now. You'll be okay, Dr. Dan reassured him. Mrs. Lambchop said she thought that Stanley's clothes would need to be altered to fit him, so he needed to change. So the doctor took his measurements with a ruler. He was 48 inches tall, about 12 inches wide, and half an inch thick. That's like this thick. Oh my gosh. How tiny, how flat. But Stanley... did I miss page? I don't think I did. But Stanley quickly discovered that being flat could be fun. In the park, Stanley and Arthur watched some boys flying kites. I would like a big kite, said Arthur. You can fly me, said Stanley. He's going to pretend to be the kite. He gave Arthur the spool, which is this tiny bit here, attached the string to his arm, and then ran across the grass to catch the wind. Look, let's follow the string. Oh my gosh, look at that bird, he looks so surprised. Up, up, up went Stanley, soaring high above the trees. But Arthur got tired and went off for a hot dog. I wonder where he left Stanley. He didn't notice when Stanley became tangled. Stanley wasn't very pleased about that. Look at his cross face, he's left him all tangled in the tree. Too busy eating his hot dog. The next morning, Stanley and Mr. Lambchop bumped into their neighbour, Mr. O.J. Dart, director of the famous Museum of Art. Mr. Dart looked worried. Another valuable painting was stolen from the museum last night, he told them. The thieves work at night by sneakery, which makes them very difficult to catch. But Stanley had an idea. Ding! Look, CCTV camera. That night in the museum, Mr. Dart showed Stanley his disguise. Stanley could hardly speak when he saw it. Look what they've dressed him up as. Oh my gosh, I bet he feels really embarrassed. But he was a good sport, so he put it on and climbed into an empty picture frame. Mr. Dart and the police hid downstairs. I wonder why he's going in the picture frame. Why would you stand in there? Now Stanley was alone. Maybe the sneak thieves won't come, he thought. Then... a glow of yellow light shone suddenly in the centre of the hall. A trap door had opened in the floor. Look, people are running through. Look at the pictures. There's Stanley. Creak. The sneak thieves came up into the hall and took the world's most expensive painting off the wall. Look, most expensive painting. This is it, they laughed. No one will suspect us. Then they spotted Stanley in his frame. I thought the shepherdesses were supposed to smile, said the first thief. This one looks fierce. Stanley waited until the sneak thieves turned their backs and shouted, Police! Mr. Dart, the sneak thieves are here! Huh? You've caught them. Oh no, whispered the second thief. I think I heard the shepherdess yell. Talking pictures, the first thief whispered back. We both need a rest. They don't know where the noise came from. You'll get a rest all right, shouted Mr. Dart, rushing in with lots of policemen. You'll get arrested, that's what. The sneak thieves were quickly handcuffed and taken to jail. Stanley saves the day. Flat boy foils robbery. The next day, Stanley got a medal and his picture was in all of the newspapers. Stanley was famous. People would point him out and whisper, Stanley Lambchop. He's the one who caught the museum robbers. But then some mean people began to make fun of him. Hi, super skinny, they would call. He looks a bit sad about that. Later that night, Arthur woke to the sound of Stanley crying. What's wrong? He said. Stanley sighed. I want to be a regular shape again, just like everybody else. Luckily, Arthur had an idea. He ran to the big toy box and tossed aside balls, aeroplanes and toy boats. I wonder what he's looking for. Got it! He said, holding up an old bicycle pump. What on earth is he going to do with that? Okay, Stanley said after a moment. I hope this works. Arthur began to pump. Stanley got bigger. Oh, look, he's pumping air into him. And bigger. And bigger. Look. Oh, it doesn't fit in his pyjamas now. His pyjama buttons burst off. Boop. And there stood Stanley Lambchop, as if he had never been flat at all. Thank you, Arthur, Stanley said. Thank you very much. Oh, look, he's happy now. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop came in to see why the boys were up so late at night. Stanley's around again, said Mrs. Lambchop. I'm the one who did it, Arthur said. I puffed him up. Mrs. Lambchop made hot chocolate to celebrate Arthur's cleverness. Then Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop tucked the brothers back into bed and turned out the light. Good night, they said. Good night, said Stanley and Arthur. And it had been a long day, and very soon all the Lambchops were asleep. A light breeze flew through the window. Phew. What do you think happened next? Oh my gosh. Look, the wind's in. Wonder what's going to happen. The end. I hope you liked the story, everybody. I think it's just about sent Ziggy off to sleep. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.